They might look tranquil, but the Solomon Islands still bear the scars of battles that were crucial to Australia's security. And now, once again, they threaten to become the centre of a geostrategic tussle with an authoritarian power.
Australia is being coerced by China because of the strong stand that our government has taken.
Events in these remote islands have sent a tremor through the federal election campaign.
Well, it doesn't look as though it's all under control. This is a very serious foreign policy failure.
And it's a situation that has our allies deeply worried.
This is such a game changer. China setting up a base in the Solomons is a huge game changer.
In the parliament in Honiara today, the country's Prime Minister formally confirmed he'd done a new security deal with Beijing.
We will not allow any threats from within Solomon Islands to threaten regional stability.
Manasseh Sogavare went on to declare neighbouring countries, including Australia, had nothing to worry about and has repeatedly claimed he won't host a Chinese military base.
Let me once again reiterate that Solomon Islands security cooperation with China is guided by the country's foreign policy of friends to all and enemies to none.
But the full details of the agreement are yet to be released, and a draft leaked last month allowed for the deployment of Chinese police, armed police, military personnel and other law enforcement and armed forces to the Solomon Islands. It also allowed for ships to stop over, arrangements which the country's opposition believes would ultimately lead to a permanent military presence and base.
It's already been done in other parts of the world. And for us here in the Solomons, it's naive of us to think that this won't happen. I think there are wordings in the draft that I saw that allows for this to happen.
So we can't just watch this and say, oh, this is somewhat concerning. This is really, really serious for our security.
While that threat of a permanent military base remains hypothetical, the ferocious battles fought in the island chain during World War II do loom large in the minds of military strategists.
The first offensive against Japan in the Southwest Pacific comes by sea, as Allied warships steam to a surprise attack on the Solomon.
US-led allies wore down the Japanese in a major campaign of attrition that cost tens of thousands of lives, hundreds of aircraft and dozens of ships.
Are the most important strategic areas off Australia's northern coast.
The nation sits in a key location to the northeast of Australia, less than 2,000 kilometres from the mainland.
Governments change, but geography doesn't. So the small islands of the Solomons and also New Caledonia are strategically important to China as they were to Japan. They control the sea lanes from the North Pacific all the way down to Antarctic.
Senior members of the military last month warned the deal could force them to change how they operate.
It does change the calculus, and that would change the way that we would undertake day-to-day operations, particularly in the air and at sea. We would change our patrolling patterns and our maritime awareness activities.
The Solomon Islands is divided internally over the deal. In recent years, there have been several protests against the country's Prime Minister, including due to his stance on China. Some have turned violent. At the end of last year, Australia sent help, continuing a long history of financial and security support. But Manasseh Sogavare claims he needs the extra backing from Beijing to manage the risk of unrest and stop damage to property and infrastructure.
I will be dispatching my foreign minister to assure our neighbours that our cooperation with China is about peace and well-being of Solomon Islands and the region.
The opposition fears it could be a ploy to use Chinese money and troops to consolidate his position.
Well, for us, it's quite clear that this is something that is, personally benefits him in terms of keeping him in power.
Last week, the Australian minister responsible for the Pacific, Zed Seselja, was sent to the Solomons in a failed attempt to delay the signing of the deal. One of the Biden administration's top officials, Kurt Campbell, is also on his way to Honiara at the end of this week. And the United States is understood to be unhappy at the way this has unfolded. But given China's increasing assertiveness, there are some diplomats in Canberra who believe this sort of arrangement was always possible in the long run. The opposition, though, claims Scott Morrison has simply bungled things, labelling this the worst Australian Pacific foreign policy failure since World War II.
This Prime Minister is complacent. He's always there for the photo op, never there for the follow-up, never does the right planning to get ahead of issues.
Built here locally.
Scott Morrison, who is playing up his national security credentials as he campaigns for re-election, tried to play down the impact of the agreement.
I'd say this, the Prime Minister of Solomon Islands has made it very clear that they are not accepting of any base in the Solomon Islands. They are not. So that is a false claim.
But he appeared to be on a slightly different page to his deputy.
China is able, if they follow this through, to set up a military base there. That will be absolutely, that's a very bad day for Australia. We don't want our own little Cuba off our coast, and that is not what is good for this nation, not what is good for this region.
One of Mr Morrison's former cabinet colleagues was also happy to hand out some advice.
I believe our Foreign Minister should be on the next plane to Solomon Islands to talk with the government to see what's actually been agreed and how that impacts on the security in the region.
Whoever wins this election will have to put engagement with the Solomons and the region more broadly near the top of the to-do list. Our allies, particularly in New Zealand and America, are keen to prevent another domino in the Pacific falling under more Chinese influence.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.